My daughter said I was an irresponsible man because I couldn't show up at her graduation. When I tried to make her understand what happened, she snapped and said she doesn't want to see me again. I smiled and calmly left her. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Charlene Anderson from New York. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. My name is Richard, and I've spent the last 18 years being a father the best way I knew how, quietly, steadily, and always from the side. I wasn't the kind to post pictures online or sit in the front row of PTA meetings. I didn't throw extravagant birthdays or surprise her with last-minute plane tickets to tropical places like her mother's side of the family did. But I was the one who took extra shifts every December so she'd never know what it meant to have less during the holidays. I was the man who skipped lunch more often than not so her tuition checks never bounced. I was the man who signed off on every bank form, who co-signed her apartment lease in a city I could barely afford to drive through. I didn't shout my love from rooftops. I stitched it into the background of her life so seamlessly that maybe, just maybe, she forgot it was there. The day of her graduation was supposed to be the day it all came together. I had it marked on every calendar I owned, digital and paper. June 3rd, noon. I even bought a new suit, charcoal gray with a navy tie, just to look my best. I left early, hours early, because I didn't want anything to go wrong. But life, as it always does, had other plans. I was just 15 minutes outside the city when my phone rang. My brother, Nathan, was in a car accident. Nothing life-threatening, but bad enough that he was being rushed to the hospital. The same brother who helped me raise her when her mother walked out. The same man who picked her up from school when I was on double shifts and read her bedtime stories in his baritone voice. I didn't hesitate. I turned the car around. I thought I could still make it. I called the hospital, gave them my number, told them to update me if things worsened, and drove like hell back toward the university. But traffic had conspired against me, thick with other parents trying to do the same thing, get to someone they loved in time. By the time I found parking, sprinted across campus, and reached the auditorium, I saw them walking out. Students in navy gowns, tassels swinging in the sun, families hugging, crying, taking selfies. And there she was, Alyssa, walking with her friends, laughing. She looked radiant, her eyes alive with pride. For a split second, I paused. I didn't want to taint that moment with my chaos. But then she turned, and our eyes met. There was no joy in her expression, just confusion at first, then disappointment. No wave, no smile, just a subtle shake of her head before she turned back to her circle and kept walking. I stood there, sweating, winded, tie crooked from running, and felt something inside me tighten. I didn't go after her then. I waited outside the venue, thinking maybe, just maybe, she'd come find me after the crowd thinned out. Maybe she'd want a picture. Maybe she'd ask what happened. But she never came. Her mother did, though. "You couldn't even show up on time," she said, not even bothering to greet me. "You always find a way to make it about you." "I had to go to the hospital," I said quietly. "Nathan," she cut me off with a wave of her hand. "Don't drag your brother into this." Alyssa doesn't want to hear excuses. Later that evening, I finally got a call from her. I picked up instantly, heart thudding. Maybe we could still salvage this. Maybe once she heard the truth, she'd understand. "I don't want to hear it," she snapped before I could speak. "You didn't come. That's all I needed to see. I'm done making space for your screw-ups. You're an irresponsible man." Those words didn't come like a punch. They came like a scalpel. Clean, sharp, clinical. She didn't yell them. She didn't cry. That's what hurt most. She meant every word. I swallowed hard, then whispered, "You don't mean that." "I do. And I don't want to see you again." There was a silence between us then. Heavy, bitter. I waited for her to take it back, to say she was angry and just venting. But the silence grew long and loud. So I smiled, because I didn't know what else to do. It wasn't a smile of peace. It was a quiet admission of defeat. Then I ended the call and calmly walked to my car. The air that night was thick and hot, the kind of heat that clung to your skin like guilt. I drove home with the window down, letting the wind slap my face. No radio, no tears, just a sinking feeling in my gut that something fundamental had broken. Not bent, not bruised, but broken. And the worst part? I wasn't even angry. I was just hollow, like the years I gave her had been erased in a single sentence. The next morning came like a thief, stealing whatever clarity I thought I had earned the night before. I didn't sleep. I sat in the armchair by the window, watching shadows shift across the floor, trying to piece together how everything could have fallen apart so fast. I kept replaying the moment. Her voice, cold and clipped, calling me irresponsible. That word clung to me like wet clothes. Not absent, not late, not struggling. Irresponsible. As if my entire life of sacrifices had amounted to one glaring failure. As if a single missed milestone wiped away years of steady, quiet devotion. I told myself she was hurt and didn't mean it. But a voice inside me, one I'd ignored for years, whispered something different. It said, "She sees you how she wants to see you." By mid-morning, I decided to call her. I didn't want to fight. I just needed her to know the truth. I figured if she could hear it, if she could just hear what happened, she might soften. Maybe she'd remember who I was. Not the man who missed a ceremony, but the one who made sure she got there in the first place. She didn't answer the first time, or the second. On the third try, the line clicked, and her voice came through, dry and already impatient. "What do you want?" I cleared my throat, nervous. "Just a few minutes. That's all I'm asking." "You had your chance," she said flatly. "You always have your chance, and you always mess it up." I could feel my temper stir, just a flicker of it. But I swallowed it down. "Alyssa, I was on my way. I left early. Nathan got into an accident. I had to turn around and help him." She laughed, sharp and disbelieving. "Of course it was someone else's fault. You really don't get it, do you?" I paused. What am I supposed to say? I made a choice. I thought I could still make it. I tried. Don't bother explaining. I'm tired of the excuses. "You don't get it because you've never been there when it actually mattered." Her words knocked the breath out of me. I wanted to scream, "Are you kidding me?" I wanted to list every unpaid weekend, every overtime shift, every loan I'd taken in silence. But I didn't. Because I suddenly understood, this wasn't about the graduation. This was about a story she'd already written, a narrative she'd clung to. I was the unreliable father in her eyes, and she needed me to play that role so her resentment could make sense. "I don't want to see you again," she said, quieter this time. There it was again, that finality, that awful certainty. I waited, hoping she'd say more. That she'd hesitate. That she'd cry, even. But nothing. Just silence. So I smiled. I don't even know why. Maybe because I was tired. Maybe because I realized that I'd already lost her years ago, and I'd just been too stubborn to see it. Maybe because part of me was relieved that I no longer had to keep begging for a seat at her table. "All right," I said simply. "Take care of yourself." She hung up. I sat there, phone still pressed to my ear, even after the line went dead. I didn't cry. Not yet. I think I was past the point of crying. What I felt wasn't sadness. It was something colder. Something heavier. Like grief mixed with clarity. Like watching a house you built catch fire and knowing the insurance won't cover it. Later that afternoon, I drove to her apartment complex. Not to see her, but to return her spare keys, which I still had on my keychain. I slipped them into an envelope with her name on it and left it at the front desk. I didn't ring the buzzer. I didn't wait around. I just stood on the sidewalk a moment longer than I needed to, looking up at the building I helped her afford. A place I hadn't even stepped foot in more than once, because I was always giving her space, always trying not to be overbearing. And suddenly, it hit me. Space was all she ever wanted. On the drive home, I called Nathan. He was groggy, still on pain meds, but alive and okay. "Did you get to the graduation?" he asked, voice scratchy. I hesitated. "No, damn." "She mad?" I exhaled through my nose. "She doesn't want to see me again." Silence. Then a sigh. "You did what you had to do. I hate that it cost you, but don't beat yourself up, man." That was the thing. I wasn't beating myself up. Not anymore. The guilt was still there, sure, but it was sharing space now with something else. A quiet, simmering anger. Not rage. Not even bitterness. Just that hollow ache that comes when someone you love treats your devotion like a disposable item. Like your effort was fine until it inconvenienced them. That night, I stood in my kitchen staring at the bank paperwork I kept in a folder labeled Alyssa. Statements, authorization letters, co-signed documents. Her name was everywhere. My support had fingerprints on every step of her journey. I thought of how easily she erased me with one sentence. How little it seemed to matter. And that's when the decision started forming, not out of revenge, but out of clarity. I wasn't going to chase someone who viewed me as a liability. I wasn't going to fund a life that didn't have room for me in it. If I was truly out of her life, then so was my wallet. I didn't act on it that night, but the seed was planted, and it was growing fast. I woke up to sunlight cutting through the blinds like a knife. The house was quiet, too quiet, like it had taken a breath and decided to hold it. For a moment, I didn't move. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she'd call. Not to apologize, I'd stopped hoping for that. Just to speak, to clear the air, but the phone stayed silent, and the silence settled into my chest like cement. I got up, made coffee, and walked into my office. That's when I saw it. Her graduation announcement, still pinned to the corkboard. Blue and gold trim, a photo of her smiling proudly in her cap and gown. I stared at it longer than I should have, then took it down, folded it once, and tucked it into a drawer I rarely opened. That drawer was full of other things she'd forgotten I kept. Mother's Day cards she made in crayon, her first report card, a picture of her on my shoulders at a carnival when she was 6. I closed it gently, not out of anger, out of weariness. I sat at my desk and stared at the banking app on my screen. Her name flashed back at me in 3 places: joint cardholder, co-signer on her condo mortgage, automatic rent transfer. It hit me all at once. I'd built her life into mine like a second spine. Quietly, faithfully. But now that she had no use for the man behind the money, I was left holding the weight of a relationship she'd already walked away from. And the thing about financial ties is, they're only invisible when the emotional ties are intact. Once those break, the numbers start to scream. I didn't act out of spite. I need to make that clear. It wasn't revenge, it was preservation. It was finally accepting the boundaries she had drawn and choosing to honor it fully. So I called the bank. The woman on the line was polite, methodical. I'd like to freeze the secondary cards linked to my account, I told her. She asked why. I hesitated. Family restructuring, I said. She clicked away, confirming the cancellations one by one. It was almost too easy. Then I asked about the mortgage payments, the ones I'd been covering for nearly a year, even though she promised to take them over once she got her internship. They're still being auto-drafted from your account, the rep said. Would you like to stop that? Yes, I replied, without flinching. Effective immediately. I sat there afterward, hands on the desk, breathing slowly. It was surreal, like cutting a cord you didn't know was strangling you. The guilt came in small waves. She'd probably be shocked, maybe scared, maybe furious. But deep down, I knew. She'd never really asked what it cost me to give her everything. And I had never asked for anything back, until now, when I asked her to simply see me. And she couldn't. An hour later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. Dad. Her voice. Sharp, tight. Yeah. What the hell? My card just declined at the pharmacy. I didn't speak. Just listened. She went on. Why is the rent app saying the payment failed? Are you okay? What's going on? I'm fine, I said calmly. I made some adjustments. What do you mean adjustments? I froze the cards and canceled the auto pays. Silence. Then a low, bitter laugh. You're punishing me? No, I said. I'm respecting your boundary. You said you didn't want to see me again. That includes my money. You're unbelievable, she snapped. Do you know how irresponsible this is? You can't just leave me stranded. There's that word again. I cut in. Irresponsible. You said it like it was fact. Like it wiped out everything I've done for you. This isn't about the past, but that's all it ever was, I said. Everything I gave you. Every sacrifice. That's the part you don't see. She was quiet for a long time. Then, you don't get to just disappear. I already have, I said, and hung up. I don't know if I regret ending the call that way. Maybe I could have said more. Maybe I should have softened it. But in that moment, I felt something in me snap into place. A decision, finally made. Not out of anger, but necessity. You can't keep investing in someone who treats your presence like a burden and your absence like a weapon. That evening, my neighbor Sheila knocked on my door. Middle-aged, divorced, and nosy in the most well-meaning way. She'd seen Alyssa grow up, seen me drag in Christmas trees by myself, seen the late nights and early mornings. "She didn't thank you, did she?" she asked as she handed me a container of lasagna. I shook my head. "She will one day," Sheila said. "But that's not your job anymore. Your job was to raise her. You did that." I didn't respond. I just nodded and took the food. Later that night, I walked past Alyssa's old room. Still neat, still untouched. Her high school trophies, her posters, her perfume still faint on the air. I closed the door gently. This time I locked it, not out of pettiness, but because I needed to stop walking in there, hoping for the girl who used to laugh at my corny jokes to come back. She wasn't coming back. At least not now. Maybe not ever. And maybe that was finally okay. The next morning didn't bring peace, it brought noise. My phone lit up before sunrise with a string of messages, each one colder, more clipped than the last. First came the texts. "I can't believe you'd stoop this low," followed by, "You ruined my life overnight." And then finally, "You're dead to me." I stared at the screen, unmoved. Not because I didn't care, but because, for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel compelled to fix it. I wasn't scrambling to soften her disappointment or rewrite her anger. I just let the messages sit there, unresponded to, like unanswered prayers in a house where faith had long dried up. But the silence didn't last. By noon, she called again, and this time I picked up. Maybe I shouldn't have, but part of me needed to hear her voice, to see if there was anything left beneath the rage, anything worth salvaging. "You think this is fair?" she started, voice already shaking. "You think this is how a father should act?" "I think this is how a man stops being used," I said. "Don't you dare play the victim," she hissed. "You missed one event, my graduation, and suddenly you get to pull the plug on everything?" "One event." My voice rose before I could stop it. "Alyssa, I gave you everything. I broke myself in ways you'll never understand just to make sure you never had to feel poor, or scared, or abandoned. And now you've abandoned me," she spat. "What kind of father does this?" "The kind who's finally listening," I replied. "To you. You said I was irresponsible, that you didn't want to see me again. So I'm making sure that's true, in every way." Her voice cracked. "You're just being cruel." "No," I said. "I'm being clear. There's a difference." There was a pause. One of those sharp, bitter silences where you can feel someone's pride about to fracture. Then she said, quieter now, "Do you even know what this does to me financially?" I laughed, not out of humor, but disbelief. "Do you know what this has done to me for years? You've lived a comfortable life on the back of my exhaustion. And the moment I stumbled, just once, you threw me away like a broken appliance. You're blowing everything out of proportion." "No," I said, calm and final. "I'm just done carrying the weight alone." She hung up. I stood there, phone in hand, pulse pounding in my ears. It wasn't the anger that rattled me. It was the emptiness behind it. She wasn't devastated that we were fractured. She was devastated that the benefits of me were gone. That's what tore me open. She wasn't mourning a father. She was mourning an ATM. Later that week, her mother called. We hadn't spoken in years outside of stiff holiday exchanges. But this time, her voice was ice. "You've made your point," she said. "Have I?" I asked. "Because I'm not trying to make one. I'm trying to live one." She scoffed. "You're punishing your daughter to make yourself feel better." "No. I'm cutting off the part of myself that's bleeding. She's your daughter. And I was her father. But she made it very clear. She doesn't need or want me." She said that out of anger. And I acted out of clarity. I replied. There was nothing more to say, so I ended the call. I spent that night on the porch, a glass of whiskey sweating in my hand. The stars were out, mocking in their stillness. I thought of all the times I'd warned myself this day might come. The nights I worked doubles, telling myself it was worth it for her future. The weekends I missed weddings, birthdays, sleep, because I believed that love meant sacrifice, and that one day, she'd see it. But maybe she never would. And maybe that was the hardest truth to swallow. Not that she hated me, but that she had never truly seen me at all. That weekend, I ran into Jason, my nephew and Nathan's son, at the grocery store. He was always sharp, respectful, with a quiet way of watching things. He looked surprised to see me. "Hey, Uncle Rich. Everything okay?" I nodded, unsure how much he knew. He glanced at my face and said, "She told people you bailed on her, that you didn't care." I stared at the cereal boxes behind him and said nothing. Jason leaned in, voice lower. "But I know you. I told her she was wrong. I saw the way you worked for her. That moment didn't fix anything, but it mattered. Someone saw me. Someone knew. And that gave me enough strength to keep standing." I went home and opened a blank document. I didn't know why at first, but I started writing. Not to beg, not to argue, just to put it somewhere. All the things I couldn't say in one breath. All the truths she wouldn't hear from my voice. I didn't plan to send it, but writing it down felt like reclaiming something. My voice, my pain, my story. I ended the letter with this: "I loved you more than I loved myself. But I can't keep proving it by disappearing." Then I closed the laptop and let the silence come. There's a moment after every storm where you expect the air to be clean. Light, even. Like the wreckage should have at least earned you some clarity. But that's not how it works with family. The wreckage just sits there, charred pieces of what you built together, waiting for someone to claim them. I walked through my days half aware, drifting between work and home, still checking my phone even though I knew she wouldn't call again. The silence between us had thickened into something permanent, like dust on a shelf. You stop noticing it until someone points it out, and that someone was Danny. Danny was my coworker, mid-30s, quick with jokes, and the kind of guy who knew when to leave you alone and when to lean in. We were standing by the loading dock one afternoon, the summer heat turning our uniforms into damp rags. He looked at me, eyes squinting under his ball cap, and said, "You okay, Rich? You've been different." I shrugged. "Long week." He tilted his head. "This about your daughter?" I didn't answer. He let out a slow whistle. "Man, words kinda gotten around. Some folks say you went nuclear." That stung, even though it shouldn't have. Gossip has a way of reducing complex pain into easy headlines. "Is that what it looks like?" He shrugged. "I don't know what happened, but you look like a man carrying a weight he finally set down and don't know what to do with his hands now." That stopped me cold. "I'm not judging," he added. I know what it's like to give and give until the giving becomes your identity. Then when you stop, you feel selfish for even breathing." I nodded, the words landing heavier than they should have. "She called me irresponsible. Said she didn't want to see me again." Oof. "I missed her graduation," I explained. "But only because I was at the hospital with my brother. She didn't care. She didn't even ask why." Danny was quiet for a long while. Then he said, "So what did you do?" I froze the cards. Canceled the mortgage payments. Cut the cord. He gave a low whistle again. "Damn, that's a lot." "Is it?" I asked. "Or is it the first real boundary I've ever drawn?" He didn't answer right away. Just looked at me like he was trying to see beneath the layers. Then he said something I didn't expect. "You think she ever saw you as a person? Or just as a provider?" That question haunted me for the rest of the day. I went home and opened the fridge, staring blankly at a row of takeout containers. Everything inside me felt used up. I didn't want food. I didn't want TV. I wanted sleep. But the kind you don't wake up from with regret pressing on your chest. I poured myself a drink and sat in the living room, surrounded by the ghosts of my own choices. I thought about every birthday I had made special, every time I showed up with groceries when she was broke in college, every single transfer labeled just in case. I had built a life where my presence wasn't loud, but my absence screamed. And now, she was finally hearing it. The guilt wasn't gone, it never really goes. But it had changed shape. It wasn't the kind that made me want to fix things. It was the kind that forced me to face myself, to ask hard questions. Had I enabled her entitlement? Had I taught her that love meant never holding her accountable? Had I raised a daughter who saw my sacrifices not as gifts, but as obligations? That night, I took the unsent letter from my drawer and read it again. I thought about mailing it, just sending it off without ceremony. But something stopped me. It wasn't finished. Not yet. I added another paragraph, hands trembling as I typed. "I don't hate you," I wrote, "but I'm learning to love myself enough not to be erased in your story." You can rewrite me however you need to in your head, but I won't keep funding the narrative. I saved the file and closed the laptop again. The next day, I got a call from her mother again. She's not doing well, she said bluntly. She's falling behind on payments, and I can't cover it. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. And I meant it. But I didn't move. She's still your daughter. I never stopped being her father. But that role doesn't come with endless credit. You're being cold. No, I replied. I'm being honest. And that's new for both of us. She scoffed. You always needed to be the hero. No, I said, voice steady. I just didn't want to be the villain. But maybe that's what happens when people don't get their way. She didn't argue further. Just hung up. Later that week, Sheila knocked again. This time, she brought cookies instead of lasagna. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, sipping tea like we were two old war generals trading scars. You holding up? She asked. I nodded. Trying. She'll come around. I don't know if I want her to. If she's just going to come back to take more. She studied me, then said, maybe this isn't about her coming back. Maybe it's about you not waiting by the door anymore. That sentence hit me harder than any argument. After she left, I sat alone, staring at the old family photo on the mantel. Alyssa was 10 in the picture, arms slung around my neck, smiling like I hung the stars. I wanted to believe that girl was still somewhere inside her. But even if she was, I couldn't keep sacrificing myself to reach her. Not anymore. Weeks passed. The silence between us turned from fresh wound to scar tissue, no longer bleeding, but still tender to the touch. I kept waiting for the day I'd wake up feeling lighter, certain I'd done the right thing. That day never really came. What came instead was a slow, grinding acceptance. Not of what happened, but of who we had become to each other. Father and daughter, yes, but also strangers. Her world had moved forward without me in it, and mine was slowly learning to exist without her at its center. That realization didn't bring peace. It brought something quieter, something sadder. One Friday morning, I passed by a local bookstore and saw a young girl, maybe early 20s, hugging her father outside. He had his arm around her, and she was holding a diploma tube in one hand, beaming like the world had just cracked open for her. I froze. My chest tightened, not from envy, but from recognition. That should have been me. Not because I needed applause, but because I had earned it. Because despite every flaw, every failure, every missed dinner and midnight job, I showed up for her life, even if I didn't always show up for the milestones. And now, I stood on the outside of my own story, a spectator to someone else's happy ending. When I got home, I finally opened the drawer and pulled out the unsent letter. The words stared back at me like a reflection in a dirty mirror. I reread the entire thing. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I just sat with it, and for the first time, I added a final paragraph, not out of desperation, but closure. I don't hate you, Alyssa. I never could. But love without respect is just quiet suffering. And I've suffered enough. Maybe one day you'll understand what I gave you. Or maybe you won't. But I'm no longer asking to be understood. I'm just asking to be left in peace. I folded the letter, put it back in the drawer, and locked it. That weekend, I went to visit Nathan. He was out of the hospital by then, walking slowly but cracking jokes like nothing had changed. We sat on his porch with beers in hand, watching traffic crawl by. She still hasn't called? He asked. Nope. He shook his head. She will. Might take years. Might come when you least expect it. But she'll look back and realize. I didn't respond. She's angry now, he continued. But that's because she finally felt the consequences. You taught her that love means safety. But safety without accountability? That's just enabling. I looked at him and said, I wasn't trying to punish her. I know, he said. You were just done bleeding for someone who didn't notice you were bleeding. That night, I went home and did something I hadn't done in years. I took down the photo from the mantel, our last family picture, and replaced it with one of just me and Nathan from a camping trip years ago. It wasn't about erasing her. It was about remembering who had shown up for me. Who still did. The fallout wasn't loud. There were no grand arguments, no apologies, no dramatic reunions. Just distance. And in that distance, I learned to breathe again. The mail kept coming, the days passed, and life returned to its rhythm. Occasionally, I'd hear her name in passing, from Sheila, from an old family friend, sometimes even from Facebook if I slipped and looked. She was still out there, still building her life. I hope she was okay. I still do. But I also hoped she was learning. Learning that love isn't just about presence, it's about effort, about acknowledgement, about grace, and learning that fathers, even the quiet ones, aren't infinite resources. We break too. We burn out. And when we finally say, enough, it's not revenge. It's survival. Months later, on a gray morning, I found myself back in my office. I opened the drawer, unfolded the letter one last time, and read it again. This time I smiled, not because it was resolved, but because it no longer hurt to read. I placed it in an envelope and tucked it into a box marked important. Not to send. Not yet. But just in case she ever asked to hear my side. Just in case she ever wanted to see the man, not just the mistakes. And as I closed the box and turned out the light, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not regret. Not bitterness. Just peace. In the end, I stood by my decision. Not because it was easy, but because it was honest. I didn't stop loving my daughter. But I stopped abandoning myself in the name of that love. And if that makes me the villain in her version of the story, then so be it. Every boundary feels like betrayal to someone who benefited from your silence. But this time, I chose me. If this story stirred something in you, if you've ever been cast aside by someone you quietly supported for years, leave a comment below. Share your experience. Family isn't just blood, it's who shows up and stays, even when it's hard. And sometimes, loving yourself means walking away from the very people you once lived for. See you soon in the next story.